Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Sally Burdett. Our top stories this hour. Gaza's health ministry says Israeli troops have raided and burnt the last functioning hospital in the north, detaining patients and staff for interrogation. Israel says it intercepted a missile from Yemen days after the Yemeni capital Sana'a was hit by airstrikes. China's foreign minister calls for an immediate ceasefire in the Middle East as he meets with his Iranian counterpart in Beijing. And protests erupt again in Seoul as thousands call for the resignation of impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol. Gaza's health ministry says Israeli soldiers have raided and torched the Kamal Adwan hospital, the last major medical facility in the north. It's understood that troops detained many patients and staff for interrogation. The World Health Organization says key departments have been burnt, meaning the hospital is now out of service. Israel denies setting the facility on fire and claims Hamas has been using it as a base during the conflict.
We were taken for interrogation around 3 p.m. They stripped us naked and left us there until sunset, and no one to aid us. We were left in the dust, and then one soldier would come every once in a while and would curse at us and spit at us. It was very ugly.
They were shooting through the windows. There were artillery shells by the gates. We came out at 7:30 a.m. and did not know what to do or where to go. They asked us to leave Kamal Adwan and head to Fakura. The way there is no road, just deep sand. My father kept having to pull me out of the sand, piles of sand that is difficult to walk in with an injury.
Our correspondent Rami Al-Magari is in Gaza.
What I can tell you is the latest Israeli airstrike on the Beit Lahia town in northern Gaza Strip, in which one child was killed and 3 others also were killed, 4 people actually. This comes against the backdrop of the early morning Israeli army crackdown on the main hospital in the northern Gaza Strip, Kamal Adwan Hospital, which has been already stormed and burnt out according to Palestinian health officials. By the Israeli army. This Kamal Adwan hospital is one of a series of other Gaza Strip's hospitals in the past 1 year and 2 months of war, Israeli war, when the Israeli army has some kind of operations or actions in certain area where there is a hospital, they kick off the hospital staff, they make some kind of operations inside the hospital. That's an Israeli norm during the last war or the current war against the Gaza Strip. Other incidents or other events in the Gaza Strip, including the killing of 9 Palestinians, 1 family from the Maghazi refugee camp in central Gaza Strip. Also, the Israeli army hit tents in the south of the Gaza Strip in Khan Yunis on the Mawasi area. Other strikes hit the northern Nusayrat refugee camp, which has been under intensive Israeli actions for more than 2 or 3 months now. The situation in Gaza, according to health officials, the death toll stands at least 40 or 48 since the yesterday night, and dozens others have been injured because of the Israeli army actions throughout the Gaza Strip.
Well, our correspondent Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv has more on Israel's response.
Israel is saying that it did not ignite fire in the hospital, and if anything got burned, it is not due to the Israeli actions. What Israel is saying is that the Kamal Adwan hospital in the northern Gaza Strip, just like many other hospitals in the Strip throughout this year and 3 months, nearly 3 months of war, have been used by militants as their headquarters. We saw it in Shifa Hospital, for example, more than a year ago. The thought of the militants, according to the Israeli army, is that the hospitals would not be raided. That is why they felt comfortable through this time and through the years to use these places as their headquarters, and that is why this place was raided. This according to the Israeli army. The IDF adding that about 100 militants have been taken to arrest, among them some members of the Nukhba forces of the Hamas. These are the units which raided the Israeli communities on October 7th, 2023. So these are the Israeli claims. The fact that this place was used as a militant headquarters regarding the fire that the IDF is saying has nothing to do with the Israeli actions in the area.
Talk to us about what's happening regarding Yemen. Israel saying it's intercepted another missile from there.
Israel has intercepted another missile. It happened at roughly 2:30 a.m. This morning. But it was another night in which millions of Israelis ran to shelters. This time not in the Tel Aviv area, but in the Jerusalem area. That is where the sirens sounded. The missile was intercepted. There were no injuries. There were no casualties and no damage, as a missile was intercepted way away from Israel's borders. But if what the Houthis are trying to achieve is to make some discomfort to the Israeli public, they're clearly achieving it night after night. Millions of Israelis are running to shelters. On Thursday night, it was the Tel Aviv area. On Friday night, it was the Jerusalem area. And I think the Houthis are well aware that the missile will mostly be intercepted. It will not be able to land or cause damage. But will it cause distress? Will it cause uncomfort? Absolutely. This is happening, and the Israeli public is growing impatient. The government, the army are trying to portray an image in which they're acting in Yemen. And yes, we did see a very big Israeli operation on Thursday afternoon, and on Friday afternoon there was another bombardment of the area, this time carried out by the United States. All that is true, but the Houthis are still standing, the Houthis are still firing, and they have the ability to cause distress here to the Israeli public. How much can Israel do in Yemen, which is located some 1,400 miles away? It's not like acting in Lebanon or in Syria, which is just across the border, so you cannot send a very big number of units to act there, combat units, infantry and so. So Israel here is being challenged by the Houthis, and at least for the moment there's no real solution.
Let's get more on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Kazem Abu Khalaf is communications specialist at UNICEF, which of course is the UN Children's Fund. Thanks very much for joining us. What reports are you getting from your teams in Gaza about the situation on the ground?
Thanks for having me. It's really dire. I mean, I keep talking to my colleagues on the ground, and they keep telling me stories, very sad stories, to be honest. I mean, in terms of children paying the highest price of this conflict, as in anywhere else in the world where there is a conflict. Let me give you an example, for instance, of 2,500 children that need medical evacuation out of the Gaza Strip seeking treatment. Now, the average is 22 children being evacuated for medical treatment per month. That is less than one child per month. If you do the math, you're talking about no less than maybe 7-9 years to evacuate 2,500 children. Assuming that this would stop, the number would stop at 2,500, of course. The situation is really bad. The health system is on its knees, and we all have seen the reports on Kamal Adwan and also the reports of newborns passing away because of the cold and the hypothermia.
What detail do you have about what's going on in northern Gaza now that we're hearing that Kamal Adwan is effectively the last hospital standing and it's not functioning anymore?
Look, Sally, I mean, in all of the Gaza Strip, we're talking about 36 hospitals. Not even one single hospital of them works it is fully functional. So only 16, maybe 17 are partially functional, according to the numbers of the WHO. And Kamal Adwan was one of the three hospitals partially functional in the governorate of North Gaza. Now that it is out of the picture, out of the circle, we're talking about only 2 hospitals. And the news have it that 15 critical cases plus probably 50 caregivers and 20 staff have been forced to move to the nearby Indonesian hospital, which already lacks medical supplies and enough staff. So of course, 15 critical cases, moving them forcibly means that you're jeopardizing their lives, needless to say, right? So this is just a part of the challenges that are taking place in Gaza, but especially in the north.
We've seen these humanitarian pauses to administer polio vaccines to children. Are there any plans to try and create some sort of temporary pause in the fighting to help children in the most distressed areas?
I mean, look, that is the core part of our messages whenever we meet with any of the parties to the conflict. We continue to urge them to, at the very least, if not stopping the war once and for all, at the very least, just, go for a ceasefire, for some sort of a truce. If not, then at the very least, give some safe zones, safe passages, so we can reach, as humanitarian organization, all areas in the Gaza Strip. But unfortunately, this is not being so fruitful for now. We continue to hope, just like many others, that the talks will become fruitful and then hence a ceasefire is achieved.
Well, thank you so much for updating us, Kazem Abu Khalaf. He's a communications specialist at the UN Children's Fund, UNICEF. In other news, China's foreign minister has called for an immediate ceasefire in the Middle East, saying political solutions could help transform the region from chaos to order. Wang Yi made the comments during a meeting with his Iranian counterpart, Sayed Abbas Araghchi, who is on an official visit to China. Both sides emphasized the importance of strengthening cooperation to benefit their citizens and promoting global peace and stability. Turkey says more than 30,000 Syrians have returned home since the fall of President Bashar al-Assad. The Interior Minister said around 30% of those going back were born in Turkey. Turkey has been hosting around 3 million Syrian refugees since the start of the conflict in 2011. Vladimir Putin has apologized to the president of Azerbaijan for what he said was a tragic incident that occurred in Russian airspace. An Azerbaijan Airlines plane crashed on Christmas Day, killing 38 people. The Kremlin says Grozny, the city at which the plane was trying to land, was being attacked by Ukrainian aerial vehicles at the time. Russia says it was repelling these attacks. Moscow says it's foiled a plot by Ukraine to kill a high-ranking Russian officer and a pro-Russian blogger. Russia's security services allege Kyiv was planning to use a bomb packed with ball bearings, which was hidden in a portable music speaker. The claims come just 2 weeks after Ukraine killed a senior Russian general using a bomb attached to an electric scooter. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, 2024 was the year of elections, and for much of Europe, that meant the rise of the far right. We'll take a look back.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and the bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
You might think you are better informed in an information age. The fact is, people are more often misled by misinformation. You might think every voice is heard in a digital world. The fact is, many nations and peoples are still underrepresented. And data poverty shuts out many. We at CGTN are committed to transcending the information gap and the digital divide. CGTN, bridging nations and civilizations. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Gaza's health ministry says Israeli troops have raided and burnt the last functioning hospital in the north, detaining patients and staff for interrogation. Israel says it intercepted a missile from Yemen days after the Yemeni capital Sana'a was hit by airstrikes. China's foreign minister calls for an immediate ceasefire in the Middle East during talks with his Iranian counterpart in Beijing. Tens of thousands of people are protesting in Seoul, demanding the resignation of impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol. The Constitutional Court is set to hold a second hearing next week to decide whether to reinstate him or remove him permanently. The country was plunged into further chaos on Friday when acting President Han Duck-soo was also impeached. Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok has temporarily assumed the role.
What I want is not only passing the impeachment motion, but also continuing the impeachment process until it is fully implemented. Therefore, I came here to continue to voice up my stance.
Now we have Choi Sang-mok as the new acting president. I hope he can quickly appoint 3 constitutional court justices to settle this crisis quickly and end it.
Slovakia's healthcare system is facing a potential collapse, with thousands of doctors saying they're resigning in protest over working conditions, funding and salaries. Hospitals warn there could be a major crisis if the dispute isn't resolved. Pablo Gutierrez reports from Bratislava.
It's an emergency for Slovakia's healthcare system. Over 3,000 doctors are set to resign on New Year's Eve because of their frustrations with the government.
We would like the state to pay more money to hospitals so the hospitals can then deliver better health care.
Doctors accuse the government of breaking promises. In 2022, it signed a 13-point memorandum with the doctors' union that guaranteed wage increases, better training, and improved hospital conditions. But Martin Smetana, a healthcare economist, says those promises have been abandoned.
I really hope we won't come to this point because this will end when the first patient dies who didn't have to die.
Experts say public hospitals are experiencing staffing shortages, and nearly 20% of new doctors choose to leave the country after graduation in search of better salaries abroad. The Slovak government recently approved a wage boost. It raises pay for nurses, but has left doctors feeling betrayed. They are demanding the 9.7% increase promised to them back in 2022, and not the 6.4% that is currently on the table. Slovakia's government argues that cost-cutting is needed to meet EU budget requirements, but doctors say the issue goes beyond pay.
They broke the deal, and we want the deal back.
With no end to the dispute in sight, the government has intensified pressure on doctors, recently introducing a bill threatening up to 1 year in prison for walkouts. The conflict has left the public and patients caught in the middle.
I support the doctors because healthcare in Slovakia is in bad shape. We have few beds, old equipment and long waiting times.
I understand why they're unhappy. They have valid reasons, but I hope both sides can find a solution.
Negotiations between the government and the doctors' union have stalled, but if the resignations go through, it means over half of the 6,000 doctors currently employed in Slovakia's hospitals will be out of work. For now, patients and hospitals brace for uncertainty, while healthcare workers demand real change. Pablo Gutierrez, CGTN, Bratislava, Slovakia.
"2024 has been the biggest election year in history, with voters in more than 70 countries across the globe heading to the polls. Many of them were held in Europe, and as concerns over security and the cost of living grow, a lot of voters are turning away from traditional parties towards the far right. Our correspondent William Denzilo reports.
Back in June, more than 400 million people across the European Union's 27 member states went to the polls. The big winner was the European People's Party, securing 188 of the Parliament's 720 seats. The centre-right EPP remained kingmakers, and Ursula von der Leyen secured another term as Commission President.
Our freedom and sovereignty depend more than ever on our economic strength. Our security depends on our ability to compete, to innovate, and to produce. And our social model depends on a growing economy while facing demographic change.
But far-right groups strengthened their hand, winning roughly 20% of the vote, as they managed to tap into many of the electorate's concerns.
The top issues they had in mind, according to polls, were kind of security, for good reasons, and cost of living. They still cared a lot about climate, but this featured more as a kind of a fourth or fifth priority for them across Europe.
The fallout from June's election will have a bearing here in Brussels for the next 5 years. But it's having an impact on domestic politics too.
Over in France, the right-wing National Rally won roughly 30% of the vote in European elections. President Emmanuel Macron said the results couldn't be ignored and triggered a snap election.
The results of those elections, a divided parliament, with Michel Barnier lasting just 3 months as Prime Minister. François Bayrou is now France's 4th PM this year. Right-wing parties saw gains across Europe this year, including in Portugal, Greece, Bulgaria and Croatia. And in Germany, a far-right group won a state election for the first time since the Second World War. Some experts say 2024 has seen a rebuke of incumbent leaders, not just in Europe, but around the world.
This might be because simply the consequences of COVID, the consequences of the war in Ukraine were too dramatic for people's pockets or for their feeling of economic security.
Over half a dozen EU member states now have far-right groups within their governments. The bloc may be politically divided, but faced with war on its doorstep and a sluggish economy, there's hope that there's enough political appetite to find some common ground. William Denslow, CGTN, Brussels.
President-elect Donald Trump has urged the US Supreme Court to pause an upcoming ban against social media app TikTok. He says he wants time to work on a political solution. The law would require TikTok's Chinese owner ByteDance to sell to an American company or face a ban from January the 19th, 1 day before Trump takes office. The platform has been accused of having links to the Chinese government and posing a national security threat, which TikTok denies. It has filed multiple legal challenges, arguing the law threatens free speech. The so-called godfather of artificial intelligence has shortened the odds of the technology wiping out humanity. Computer scientist Professor Jeffrey Hilton, who was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics earlier this year, is warning that the pace of change in the technology is much faster than expected. He says there's up to a 20% chance it will drive humans to extinction in the next 3 decades. Previously, he'd said 10%. Air passengers in the United Kingdom are facing major disruption as thick fog causes flight delays and cancellations. The worst affected airports are Heathrow and Gatwick in the south, where forecasters say visibility could be reduced to just 100 metres. Temporary air restrictions are in place and disruption is expected to continue throughout the weekend. Well, there's been a surge in snow tourism in China's ice city, Harbin, as it prepares to host the Asian Winter Games in February. The city has opened over 100 skating rinks for residents and visitors to enjoy. Our correspondent Zheng Songwu reports.
So this is one of the skating rinks in Harbin City, and just like other ice surfaces, it's completely free to use and it's open to the public. And with the Asian Winter Games just around the corner, the number of folks lacing up their skates has grown substantially. The city has announced that 110 skating rinks will be opened to the public by January 5th.
At Dingxiang Park, staff have cleared off the snow to turn this lake into a skating surface. Parts of the makeshift rink have been split into several areas that will be used for ice hockey, skating, and a local activity known as top whipping.
Compared to skiing, skating has its own advantages, since we only need to have skates. It's cheaper. I usually come here in the afternoon, and today I spent half an hour skating 20 circles, about 10,000 meters. I think it's the best sport for regular people.
Locals in Harbin have long learned and practiced the winter season sports, with many people learning how to skate since childhood.
Our
country has highlighted the importance of outdoor sports in recent years. The number of free skating rinks has surged compared to previous years. They were built in sports parks or squares. We're happy with the upcoming Asian Winter Games.
The city has announced 3 super-sized skating rinks will be opened soon, with one of them set to become the largest in Asia. Designers say it will span over 800,000 square meters. 正送 CGTN, Harbin, Heilongjiang Province.
And that's the world today. Thanks so much for watching. There's more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's The Agenda with Juliet Mann. For now, from all of us here in London, goodbye.